Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Yes, friends, it's that time again. Thanks for tuning in to Tiger Claw Radio. Oh yeah, we're going to kick things off this week with a track called Deflation World. This is from Mary over in Battle of the Bits, submitted for the Summer Chip 11 contest. This is a brand newly submitted track that at this point has only been listened to 4 times. So let's make it 5. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Stick with us. Back again in the studio. Not much going on this week in terms of news. I think I mentioned this in a previous week, but Dr. Mario World has been given an end date, an end of service date. And I read about this over on retroware.com. Apparently, I wasn't aware of this game, but it was an Android iOS game that Nintendo had put out. What kills me is that it's only been out for 2 years. Is that right? It was 2019. So 3 years, I guess, tops. This is not an old game. And it had, again, I've never played it, but from what I'm reading, they had a lot of this like microtransaction stuff going on. And to shut a game down after only a couple years that people are putting money into like that, I don't know, that's rough. It is really rough. So this is... And to be perfectly honest, the game looks, kind of cool. Dr. Mario's a great game. There's no Dr. Mario game on the Switch, from what I understand. So there's definitely still a market for it. I don't know if it's the reception or what, but yeah, that's another game that's reached end of life. Steam is overhauling their downloads page, and I'm picking this up from PCGamer.com. If you get the beta of Steam, then their downloads and storage management tools are getting revamped, and it looks good. They've added a nice progress bar that shows all of your hard drive space, and then it's color-coded. This amount is being spent on games, this amount is being spent on workshop items, and this amount is free or whatnot. I think it's a neat feature. I don't do the Steam beta because I don't like the constant updates. I think Steam updates enough as it is. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not really using the Steam client features as much as I used to, so, it is what it is. Oop, hang on a second. That's really about it in terms of news for this past week. I checked some of the other sites I typically do, and there were a couple of, hey, there's a new game coming out that's like this, but worse. Just like there always is. Meanwhile, Battle of the Bits has Summer Chip 11, in full swing. There's only 2 days left of entries, so this is really the time to go listen to songs. You can listen to tracks like Deflation World from Mary that we heard earlier, with only a couple listens to it. Now that is very likely to not make that track list at the end, in which case we would just sail right past it and miss it. So this month, the game of the month is Super Punch-Out for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So I played that a little bit this morning, actually. And it's a great game. It's a lot of fun. But those Punch-Out games, they're all pattern-based. So like, there's very little RNG in terms of the behavior of the enemies and what you have to do to actually succeed. It's all pattern-based. So coming back to it after a long time, all those patterns are gone. I have to relearn them. So the first time I picked it up, I played it on the Embernick because I didn't want to drop any frames at all. And it was rough. See, the second guy you actually feed, the bear hugger, he took me down once, which was surprising. But the first run through, I rolled right through him, rolled right through the hurricane guy that's after him. I got to the end of the second cup where you fight the Sandman again. Now, what's interesting is when I first started playing it, I was like, oh yeah, that's really awesome. The Sandman looks older. But then when you read the profile, oh yeah, he's only in his 20s. Okay, that's kind of silly. But Sandman took me out. That's one I could do, but and I've done it in the past, but that's one you got to practice for a little bit. Also, Bald Bull, which I find interesting because some of these old names like Bald Bull and the Sandman, whatever, they've made them easier in this game than they were in the NES. And I actually suffered a loss to Bald Bull before I came back and beat him. But it was fun. I don't know, I had a really good time. What I think makes those games stick out so much, because there's a lot of boxing games out there, and it's really only the Punch-Out series that kind of creeps up above the rest, is the character design. Like, and I remember this from being a kid. I remember playing the NES version, and like the big draw of wanting to be successful is because I couldn't wait to see what the next opponent was going to look like. And I think because of that, there was a little bit of disappointment whenever in the first game I would run into those matches where it was like the rematch, you know? You fight Piston Honda, and then he comes back again later, but harder, and that was a bit of a disappointment because you didn't get to see a new character design. Great games, though. Yeah, so I will continue to play that. Hopefully I can push it a little bit further before the end of the month. Are you playing it as well? What do you think? You playing a video game? We'll talk about a video game. All right. That said, let's go back to Summer Chip 11 and see what kind of stuff's going on. Oh, here we go. This is actually not from the Summer Chip. This is from the psychedelic competition that they had just about at the same time. And I'm actually on this competition with sort of a garbage throwaway song. But this was my favorite of all the submissions. This is from, what's the guy's name? Ravencloak? Ravencloak. And the name of the song is Moon Song. It's really good. I dig it. This is from the psychedelic competition, Battle of the Bits. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. think that would have been a really great Friday the 13th track. I could imagine listening to this while playing one of those games where I have to hide in a closet while the killer like passes by or something, like maybe Dead by Daylight or something like that. Did they ever make a good third game of that type? Because as far as I know, it's really only those two. Anyway, all right, let's get back to it. So it looks like the I don't know if I talked about the Final Fantasy bundle earlier or not. Yeah, Final Fantasy 1 through 6 for $74.82, but not just 1 through 6. They're remakes of the 2D versions of 1 through 6. So no, 3D remake of 3 or any of that stuff. This is the OG Final Fantasy experience on Steam, and at discounted price, it's $74.82. Don't know if I'd pay that. Actually, I do know that I would not pay that. I'm not saying it's not worth it. If you're a big Final Fantasy guy, like if you're actually going to go through all of these 6 games in succession, then maybe it is, but not for me. For me, I like to play games of much lower quality. I play games like Vegas Slot, which I got for 49 cents on the last big Steam sale. Clink, 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 clink. I press the button, and sometimes it flashes lights like I win. One thing that kind of bothers me is the Final Fantasy games that I do own, Final Fantasy 3 and 4, they changed the names in Steam to say Final Fantasy 3 3D Remake and Final Fantasy 4 3D Remake. I don't like that. I wish... Will it let me change the way they appear? Properties? No, it doesn't let me change the way the title appears. It's stuck saying that. Which isn't... It's unfortunate, but... It is what it is. That's a small gripe. What are you going to do? I can always make a desktop shortcut and change the name there. Here's a really good one for you. There's a Team 17 sale going on right now, and most of the good Team 17 games I have already. So at first, I just kind of panned this. But amongst the games that are on sale, the Worms Armageddon release on Steam is going for $2.99. That is a game that is well worth $2.99. A lot of the other Worms games, they're kind of take it or leave it, whatever. Let's see. The Worms Pinball is really fun. That's $1.60. Worms Golf is kind of meh, take it or leave it. The original Worms, in my opinion, was kind of lacking. That's $1.60. Worms Blast is awful. But Worms Armageddon, absolutely worth it. If you never experienced Worms Armageddon back in the day, this is one that's still... I mean, they added like a matchmaking bot that hosts matches, so you can still play it online. Worms World Party, also a good game, but it doesn't have that matchmaker bot. So, $2.99, I would only get that if you got people locally to play it with. Some of these other games may have been fun, but I just never found the fun myself. Worms Clan Wars, never played that. Worms, looks like I clicked away from it. The 3D one, I tried that a couple times, it just didn't resonate with me. I feel like there was another good Team 17 game that is not on Steam at the moment. But it's not coming to me, and to be perfectly honest, I don't feel like jumping off of my recording again to dig it up. Oh yeah, Overcooked. That's Team 17, but that's not on sale right now. I think it's just specifically Worms. Worms Rumble, the first real-time ever Worms combat game. So it's real-time, so it's not Worms that we remember then. It's something new or different or worse. It's like Worms, but worse. Yes, there you go. That's the best way to explain it. That is the all-encompassing meme, is it not? We are 16 minutes in. It's pretty early, but I want to take a minute before we dig into the fail bag to thank the sponsors. This is a Patreon-sponsored program. We do good stuff. We read the... there's Monday Night Morrowind. Every Monday we play some Morrowind and hang out. I also offer early access to the show to the individuals who support and keep the lights on. And I also, as a tradition, like to read their names off in a hall of distinguished gentlemen, just to tip my hat. And they are Hemrock, Tecmoballs, Darabka, and Eric Controller. Thank you guys so much for keeping TCR online. It's been like 12 years, and I'm still around. And the reason it's still here after 12 years is because of these 4 gentlemen. So thank you very much, and I hope you're enjoying the party. With that, why don't we check out one more chiptune? Stick with us. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. That's DCT Master with Warp Drive Alpha Centauri. So whatever happened to when they used to accept Mario Paint composer tracks on these types of things? I'm noticing that they don't do that anymore. I looked around in some of the format descriptions, and at one time they would host Doom WADs. Like, I don't know, somehow they would make a song out of a Doom map, or you could submit a Doom map as an entry in one of these competitions. I have no idea how that'd work, but it'd be pretty interesting to see. Also, it seems like something they don't do anymore. Like, the description of the format still exists, but whenever I look at the competitions that drop, they never include that one. But it is what it is. That's Battle of the Bits. There's good stuff, there's quirks, there's ups, there's downs, just like any other website on the internet. All right, boys and girls, it's that time again. This time, let's kick things off with our good buddy Balzac, who reached out with an audio comment, which are always so much fun. All right, Balzac, what do you got for us, brother?
So it's August 2nd, 2021. Oh, so I'm really glad you enjoyed the McDank bit I sent previously, and I'm really glad that our kids got a kick out of it too. Yeah, that was a pretty tasty and fun time I had with eating one and telling you about it. Heart was probably going to stop after 5 minutes of eating it, but you know what? It was worth it in the end, and I would definitely recommend you try it out as well one of these days. And if you can't finish the whole thing by yourself, it might be a good idea to split half of that with Junior to help you ease the load a little bit. And you asked what dank meant. If you don't remember, Jerry Terrifying used to refer to his game room as the dank pit of despair, so that's dank as the definition of something that's cavernous or dark. For my personal opinion about describing food with it, the best thing I could sum it up is if you ever had a fried candy bar, take a bite of it, and as soon as it goes through your throat, you can already feel the fat being absorbed into your body. That's how I would usually refer to dank when it comes to food, because after you take a bite of the McDank, you can already feel all that fried chicken, patties, cheese, and bread are already getting absorbed into your body. So if Junior ever asks again what dank means, you can tell him those definitions. On another previous TCR, you were talking about what the fate of Steam boxes ever ended up being. Well, if you don't remember, Steam boxes launched back in 2015 with a lot of different manufacturers making it. Actually, I think Alienware produced a Steam box at launch along with other companies, but I don't remember the other companies' names. And what ended up happening was nobody ended up buying it because it was kind of underpowered, and it was basically running Linux, but it was under the operating system Steam OS, and it looked pretty to navigate the menus and all that, but in all honesty, the games were not really there. And somebody did a test with comparing the Windows versions with the Steam OS versions of some games like Dota and Counter-Strike, and the Windows version ended up actually running a bit better than the Linux version, which really says a lot about the faith that Valve put into that product. And actually, I think the Steam box only ended up lasting for maybe about a year or two until Valve Valve completely discontinued it. And if you don't remember, the Steam box actually came with a special controller that had the analog sticks replaced with 2 touchpads, and that also ended up selling poorly. What happened with the controllers was back in 2018 or 2019, Valve cut the price of the controllers to $5 a piece, and that sold out immediately. So I guess the demand was kind of there for those controllers, just not $60 worth of a demand. That's what ended happening with the Steam boxes, and with this Steam Deck that Valve announced, maybe it might be the second coming of them releasing another product that's going to be a lemon. But who knows? Because in all honesty, I don't know who the Steam Deck technically is for, because let's face it, for the younger gamers, it's too expensive, and for the hardcore PC gamers, it's too underpowered. Even though I think technically it looks nice and it should have been what the Switch ended up being at launch. But personally, for me, I don't really know who this is for. And let's face it, nobody's really going to buy the $400 unit because that's the one that only has 64 gigabytes. You could barely fit one game in that thing, even though you could use external storage on it. You can't just pop in a regular SD card. You have to get this special SD card that has a faster read rate, which I'm going to give a guess is probably double or even triple the amount of a normal SD card. So you're already going to end up spending probably the same amount of money you would have got if you got the $530 version. But it will be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out when it actually does get released in the Q2 of 2022. Also on TCR, you were talking about Grand Theft Auto Vice City and San Andreas and wanted to know if those games were good or not. Oh man, you're already digging deep into my gaming memories, because when those games came out, that was probably the first times I actually cared about GTA. Back when I was 10 when Grand Theft Auto Vice City came out, and 11 when Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out. When San Andreas came out, I remember my friend ended up acquiring a copy somehow. I don't know how he was able to convince his parents to do it, but as soon as that game launched, I ended up sleeping over at my friend's house, and we ended up playing that game till 2 in the morning. Even though if I had kids now, and I'm sure you would agree with this, CF, I don't know if I would be comfortable putting that in the hands of an 11-year-old these days, because if you don't know, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is a lot of swearing. Actually, in the first half hour of San Andreas, they dropped the F-bomb at least 50 times, so I don't know if I would be comfortable giving kids that, but I would recommend us adults would be comfortable playing, and I'm sure you would enjoy it as well. You probably would just have to put on headphones when Junior is around so he doesn't hear what the characters are saying in the game. If you're going to stick with consoles, to get the Xbox versions of Vice City and San Andreas, because the better frame rate, the more colorful graphics, and I think in Vice City, this wasn't in the PS2 version, but in the original Xbox version, when you look at the sun, there would actually be a glare that you could notice, whereas in the PS2 version, there was none of that. And also, this is a personal aesthetic for me, but in the Xbox versions, you press the right trigger to accelerate, so it feels more authentic, whereas the PS2 versions, you have to just hold the X button. But if you don't really want to go console-wise, the PC versions are good too, but I think I heard for the San Andreas PC version, the soundtrack got gutted because the licenses for some of the songs expired, which hopefully it's not any of the Ice Cube, Tupac, or NWA songs, because those are the songs that define the 90s. I mean, how could you have a game set in Southern California in the 90s that doesn't have California Love or Check Yourself? Recently I finished Half-Life on the Dreamcast, because if you don't know, Half-Life ended up having an unreleased port linked on the internet. I played and beat both the PS2 and Dreamcast versions, and I think I would like to lean in more on the Dreamcast version. Yeah, the PS2 version has a more consistent frame rate, but I think I like the Dreamcast version a little bit more because it feels like what Half-Life was back in 1998, whereas the PS2 version, the graphics a little bit upped to take advantage of the PS2 technology. Oh yeah, and this segment's for Hemrock a little bit. You were telling me if I ever played Shining Force 1 after I told in an audio comment that I was playing Shining Force 3. Actually, I ended up playing Shining Force 1 after I got kind of burnt out with Shining Force 3. And Shining Force 1 is pretty good, and I got like an hour into it, but I could definitely tell that Shining Force 3 is a better game overall, because I think I just like the 32-bit graphics more than the 16-bit graphics, and also because Shining Force 3 is a really long game, because if you don't know, Shining Force 3 was split into 3 different parts, and from what is estimated, it takes about 90 hours to finish all 3 parts, so that's really daunting compared to, I think it only takes maybe about 15 to 20 hours to finish Shining Force 1, but I really enjoyed it. I'm probably going to try to attempt to finish the rest of Shining Force 1 once I'm done with Shining Force 3, which that will probably take me a while. And also, I wanted to ask you another thing about this, Hemrock. Pure Solar, did you ever get far in it by any chance? I remember on the Monstercast 2, you were talking about how you never even opened the Genesis version, but you have that game on other platforms. Well, there is one version on the Dreamcast that you could technically get that I actually started playing maybe an hour or two of, and it's actually pretty good. It gives you the option to play the Genesis version of the game instead of the new updated graphics. It looks like it's basically the Genesis version, and what's good about it that I think makes it superior to the Genesis version is that you don't need any additional add-ons like the Sega CD in order to access the CD quality music since it's already there. And from what I played, it's pretty fun, but even though I own the game 3 times already, I can never really get too far into Pure Solar. Even though I was really hyped for that game just like you were back in the day, I don't know if I could really muster up the interest to play more of it, but maybe I'll play it again sometimes. But then again, I have a lot of other RPGs I want to get back to, like Skies of Arcadia. And finally, CF, I want to bring this to your attention. Do you remember the Mondo Drunkcast by any chance that happened almost 10 years ago on July 21st, 2011? It was the Mondo Coolcast where Jerry Terrifying, Retro Kaiser, and Shintai had to take a shot every time they mentioned Kotaku. You and the Gaming Beast were actually on that episode as well, but you guys weren't actually drinking, and you guys didn't get there until the halfway point. It's a pretty funny time, because if you don't remember, Jerry Terrifying was going on a huge rant about ICP for like 30 minutes. I recommend giving it a listen. It's Mondo Coolcast episode 33. I actually participated in the 10-year anniversary Mondo drinking game by actually drinking to the episode as it was playing along. And let me tell you, after about 3-hour mark, I felt like I was about to throw up because I ended up drinking almost 2 coffee cups full worth of blended Scotch whiskey. And it was pretty enjoyable. And it lasted all into the night. Actually, if you want to know my escapades with that, check out Death Adder Super Show episode 119. So I guess that's it for me for now. So until next time, later.
Well, it looks like the audio comment you sent in has a different bit rate. That's fine, but that causes Audacity to do that thing where from now until the end of the show, every time I record, it's going to automatically set my bit rate to 22,000 hertz. So I'll have to switch it, and if I forget, then it ends up like changing the speed. So there were some episodes like about a year ago or so where hold on, that is okay. Where I didn't realize what was happening, and I was putting in songs that had a different bit rate, and without realizing it, I would publish an episode where it's like for a solid 15 minutes I was talking at like a slow pace or a fast pace or something. That's because of the change in bit rate. It's not a big deal. You got a few things in that comment that were awesome that I really want to point a hand to. First is the Steam Machine versus Steam Controller thing, and I want to bring this to a rest because I know this comes up a lot. Big Steam guy, it makes perfect sense for me to be interested in a consoleized version of Steam. However, the big problem with the Steam machines, in my opinion, was the fact that they were Linux compatible. They were running Linux, and they didn't have any sort of Windows compatibility layer. And now I ran Linux for a while when I first built my machine. It was $20 to get a Windows 7 key off of Kingwin at the time, and I did not have the $20 to get a key. So because I spent everything on building my computer, I didn't even have a monitor. I had to plug into a TV. So I started with Linux, and I got familiarity with what it looks like, what my Steam library looks like, going through the Linux filter. I lost a great deal of games. A lot of the smaller games from less experienced developers or whatever, they lose compatibility when you switch over to Linux. As for the bigger games, at the time I was most interested in playing Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which worked past tense. Don't know if this is still the case. It did work better on Linux than it did on Windows, but that was not the norm. When that happened, so it's like even though the Steam machines were junk, and the Steam OS was even more junk, it caused a lot of Steam games to get ported over to Linux, which is a good thing. And I kind of wish that had continued. Otherwise, I'd probably go back to Linux, because apart from the game compatibility, every other part of running Linux, I think, has been a lot better. The only reason I'm dealing with Windows now is because I needed to play all the games that I have. But man, if they could fix that, I'd ditch this stuff in a heartbeat. Go right back to Linux. Yeah, so that's Steam versus Steam controllers. I remember when they dropped the controller price to $5. That was during a sale or something. I tried to get one, but then they added like $20 to ship it, which in all honesty is perfectly reasonable. I just didn't have it at the moment, and yeah, I didn't get one. But it has touchpads. It looks awful, and I haven't heard anyone say anything good about it, so that's, mixed feelings. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I actually tried that for the first time this past year, and I played it for, how long did I play it for? Because I happen to have it open. 2.5 hours. I thought I played it more than that. 2.5 hours, and yes, you're right. I know the soundtrack is gutted on the PC. Most of these types of things where the soundtrack gets messed up, you can mod it back in. San Andreas is a bit of a different story. In order to mod that, you have to install a patch that downgrades it to a previous version. So it had modding compatibility, then that was patched out by Rockstar. However, you can do that. There are guides to do that. I don't imagine it'd be too difficult. But yeah, okay. I didn't really, mind too much at the loss of the music. I didn't really feel that one quite as hard as some people do. But, that's cool. It was a cool game. I saw a lot of things start in San Andreas, as new concepts in the open world genre that were used again later, specifically in the Saints Row franchise, like the ability to get tattoos and the ability to go shopping for clothes and that kind of thing. It was a fun game. Didn't play it too long, but yeah, it was fun. I have played Vice City, but it's been so long I remember virtually nothing about it. Last time I played Vice City was on a PS2 and it was like a new game. I was at my buddy Denji's house. He had just picked it up. It had just come out. And I think I sat down with it one time, maybe twice. I don't know. I don't remember why it didn't resonate with me. What are you going to do? And then finally you talk about the drunk cast with Jerry Terrifying and the gang. And I remember that very well. What I remember the most about that was the ICP rant. That was around the time that ICP was a big meme because they released that song Miracles. And Jerry was really upset about how stupid that song was. And the whole magnets meme, magnets, how do they work? And what I liked about that night was that was the one and only time that he was really like letting it out. Like, what is this song? You guys are stupid. Whereas every other night after that, when I brought that up, he would like try and defend them as like, oh, it's just this thing they do sometimes. But I feel like that one night he really let it out. And let us know how he really feels. And yeah, that was good times. I can't believe it's been that long. Yeah, it was 11 years ago, or whatever it was. Jerry, I hope you're doing well, man, out there, wherever you are in podcast land. Yeah, and that's the audio comment from Balzac. Always good to hear from you, brother. I really appreciate when you do those. It's a lot of fun. Hope you're doing well. Hope your family's good. Don't have too many McDanks. We want you to be around a long time. All right, let's see what else is in the fail bag. Okay, what you're hearing now was recorded a day or so later than everything up to this point. I was messing around on Battle of the Bits, and I was able to confirm. I went into their IRC and started asking questions point blank about Hemrock's account, and no, he didn't get banned, as it turns out. There is some sort of issue. Don't know what's going on. They are looking into it. It is what it is. I did get a slap on my profile, but at least we can say for 100% certainty that they did not ban Hemrock for no reason. All right, so that's good. I'm really happy to hear that. So I went over to the Summer Chip 11 competition, and I uploaded the track that I made, because I made a track on FamiTracker a few days back, or probably like a week plus ago now, that I had been sitting on because I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. It's definitely going to be on the CME compilation coming up. But yeah, I threw my hat in, and it's good. I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah, I'm really relieved that there isn't any real tension there. That's pretty awesome. This one's coming from Hemrock. He says, Hey, Paisan, thank you as usual for another episode. You mentioned how the battle system in Final Fantasy I is troublesome because if an enemy dies, the additional attacks directed towards that enemy are not automatically reassigned to other opponents, and thus your character essentially wastes a turn. I understand the frustration. However, when playing through the original NES version of FF1 years ago, I actually thought this mechanic made the game more strategic. It meant that you had to put some forethought into your attack assignments, as opposed to mindlessly mashing a single button. PS1 and GBA versions fixed this so-called bug. If you find the original FF1 too archaic, you may be interested in the 2D remaster that was just released at the end of July. See Retro News. The other Final Fantasy is... the original Final Fantasy is where I got my internet moniker, Hemrock. It is an anagram of Warmech, which is a hidden boss. To my knowledge, it's the toughest opponent in the entire game, even more so than the final battle. It's nice to hear you chatting about Retroware TV. I think they're actually where I first ran into your content back when the Happy Video Game Nerd and the Gaming Historian were getting their start. What happened to Ito Bandito's podcast? Speaking of podcasts, do you have any old episodes of the Ben and Derek Random Show? All right, quick break so we can address a couple of things he's listed here. I don't think Ito Bandito ever got his podcast off the ground. He might have done an episode or two, but I looked specifically to see if he had something up, like a Retroware TV cast or something is what it probably would have gone under. If he ever released anything, it's not there now. Which, you know, I don't blame him. That's the way these things go. You have grand ideas for projects and they just never happen. You know, goodness knows I'm just as guilty about that. As far as the Ben and Derek Random Show, I don't have anything saved because it was up there for so long. I just assumed it would always be there. Ben and Derek. Let's see if Random Show. Ben and Derek's Totally Random Show on VentureBeat. Let's see. There it is. Let me see if there's actually anything I can download. I hope you enjoy episode 4. And then you click on it and it just goes to the Retroware homepage. Yeah, I think it's gone. As far as I know. Oh no, here we go. BitChute has it. Ben and Derek's Totally Random Show, episodes 1 through 15 on BitChute. I wonder how long a video that is. I'm loading right now. Stick with me. I'm hoping to just see the part where it's like, okay, you're 2 seconds into a 3-hour video or whatever. But 15 episodes. It's going to be a long one. Hosted by Ben Hall, Video Game Takeout, and Derek Alexander, Happy Video Game Nerd, and Stop Skeletons from Fighting. Retroware TV includes the first 15 episodes, including the special episode 1.9. I can't find episode 16, sorry. Yeah, during the run of that show, that was what I wanted, was really, above all, to make it onto the Ben and Derek's Totally Random Show. It's when my oldest son was just a baby, and I was able to sit in on a recording, but they never used the footage because it was right about the time they ended the show. Yeah, I don't know, it's good stuff. Apparently, there's still an archive on BitChute. You can listen to all but one episodes mashed together in a single massive recording. Takes some searching, though. Let's get back to the email. Alright, he says, you spoke about the GB operator and how it sold out. Did you know that the Retron 5 can do many of the same things as the GB operator, such as backing up your save game? Maybe you could consider this as an alternative, although it's more expensive. I did see the Retron 5. I don't really have a problem with how much more it costs, because yes, it costs more, but there's increased functionality as well. Like, you can actually, you know, play other games on it or whatever. Like, I think it's reasonable that it costs more. My problem with the Retron 5 is that the form factor is huge compared to the GB operator. I mean, rightfully so, but I liked the idea that a GB operator is a tiny little thing. I can plug it into the back of my tower and it can sit on my desktop forever. And I don't have to like get it out every time I use it or put it next to the TV or something like that. I liked the idea that my computer was getting a console slot. That's what I liked. But I haven't revisited the idea of getting a Retron 5 in a long time. I kind of abandoned the idea because I was afraid of input lag. And I know that clones have gotten a lot better about that, especially from Hyperkin. Since they abandoned the idea of using like the wireless controllers. But yeah, we'll take a look. Let's see. Yes, I did give you that Game Boy camera. I still remember where I bought it. It was at the bargain bin at Play and Trade, which subsequently went out of business years ago. I think it cost me $1. I believe other things in that bargain bin included PS1 memory cards and VMUs, which were probably $1 each. Now those things are $10 to $20 a piece. My, how times have changed. Yeah, man, we're getting older. It happens. Inflation. We partake in a hobby where Most of these items are getting value over time. It's a weird thing. I think it's weirder to think of how much time has passed since then, to be perfectly honest. But you're right. And by the way, while we're on the subject, thanks for that. I appreciate that Game Boy camera. At the time, I was really into exploring chiptunes for the first time, and it has like a weird little rhythm mini game in it that some people were using to make tracks. I didn't, make anything from it, but I got to play with it a little bit, so thanks for that. Give me a second here. All right, what else we got? You played some great tracks on the last TCR. I really enjoyed Delightful Journey. Yeah, isn't that a great song? It's a really good track. I see your Pow Kitty video did really well with the view count. I think another follow-up vid showing what the PS1 games can run, what PS1 games can run well or don't on the Pow Kitty would be interesting. You may want to check out this article. It has a link to pre-configurations for many PS1 games that optimize them for the Pow Kitty. Yes, I've heard of Dragoon X Omega. Have you ever played it? What are your thoughts? I put about an hour into it or so. I like what they've done with it. I like what you've done with it. It's got a great atmosphere, but starting with no weapons was awful. Like, you go outside of the castle, you fight what was the equivalent of like a blue slime, and one battle is all you can take, and you got to go back in and save. To be fair, since it's a ROM hack, it's kind of expected in the game design that you're going to have access to like some of the modern day emulator controls, save states, possibly speeding things up if you need to. So I would give it a play if you really enjoyed the original Dragon Warrior, because it's a great take on the original Dragon Warrior. It's essentially a total conversion, a really well done one. But the start was such a slow pace that I found it difficult to get into. Like the original Dragon Warrior, you started with enough money to go buy a weapon and armor, and there's even like a cheaper weapon that you just never buy because you already have more money than you need for that thing. And I never really I always thought like, I wonder why this is here. Well, now you don't start with any money. It's like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know. It's worth a try, especially for you, because I think you have an appreciation for these older games in a way that not everyone does. I think you might actually really enjoy it. What else we got? And then we move on to the retro news. Give me 1 second here before we do that part. Alright, retro news. Final Fantasy 1 through 6 are getting 2D remasters that are available for Steam, iOS, and Android. First 3 just got released a few days ago, and FF4 through 6 should be around the corner. Despite only being released a few days, there are already some complaining about the font. But no need to fear, for the heroes of the internet have already made a fix. See here. Also, there's a summary of the 2D remaster project from the Retronauts website. Latest in a long string of retouched ports, the first 2 Final Fantasy games, as well as the first ever 2D remake of Final Fantasy III. First ever, wow. I didn't realize that they never remade it. These versions have been completely replaced, the previous widely criticized versions, and promise yet another visual reinterpretation headed up by the original daughter, Kazuo Shibuya, and aims to closely reflect the illustrations of the designer Yokishita Amano in the pixel art form, as well as newly arranged music overseen by the classical composer Nobu Uematsu, and other features like auto battle, the bestiary, and a music player, and the conventional new high definition UI. Okay, let's stick on that for a second. That's cool. That is really cool. I am not super worried about the font. What was the problem with the font? Was that it didn't look like the old one, or was that there was like some thing where it was difficult to read? Yeah, because if it's difficult to read, then I totally get it. But if it was, hey, that it didn't look like the old one, I didn't play the old Final Fantasy games enough to be married to the font in that way. There are games that I would complain about if they did that, like if they re-released the original River City Ransom and it looked like even a little bit different, I would be like, because I love that game, So because of that, I totally get it. However, it wouldn't have ruined the experience for me one way or the other. I am interested to note that you said they were iOS and Android. Like I saw them pop up on the Steam main page. But let's see if they're, like, for example, I'm looking at the Google Play Store right now. Final Fantasy 2. Let's just see what we get. Okay, great. Final Fantasy II, $11.99, which is a lot for an Android game, but the way that Square prices their games, it's not bad. It isn't. So since they put it on Android, is it controller compatible? It's not always easy to tell if it'll work for the controller, but maybe they were nice enough to say it in the improved gameplay, including touch controls, modernized UI, auto battle, and more. It doesn't say if it's controller compatible or not. I'll have to look into that more. But let's talk about a little bit about the auto battle thing. My problem with the original Final Fantasy was not so much, how do I say this? The thing about like where you have to choose more carefully where your attacks go. I get that. You have a point, and like when I'm engaged in a battle, it really wasn't that big of a deal. And by engaged, I mean like I'm in a battle where it's like I have to pay attention to what I'm doing and whatnot. The only time it's really a problem is when you get too strong and you're just trying to like walk from point A to point B, and every battle is like something you just have to grind out. Then it's a pain. That's where I feel like the modern era needs to step in. I'm totally fine with that being an issue, like with that being something you have to take care of when you're, when you're in a dungeon or something. But it makes the grinding difficult in a game where there's a lot of grinding, and in a game where the grinding is a point of contention for a lot of people. A lot of people can't get down with the Final Fantasy games because of the way the grinding works. We talked a little bit about classic Mondo Coolcast this week. There was an episode where Shintai and Jerry Terrifying had like a heated argument about grinding. And Shintai was arguing the fact that sometimes grinding can be fun. If you like these old games, the wandering around and doing the fights and whatever can be a good time. And Jerry was arguing they call it grinding because by its nature it's not fun. I think they were arguing opinions, and therefore I don't think you can really come up with an answer on that one. I would argue that it can be fun, and that's the reason why we have idle games, because they're just grinding the game. But the grinding procedure is something that could use a little help in these old games, I guess. At least that would make them more palatable for younger gamers. I guess we could say that. Like, my kids, there's no way my kids could sit and play through the original Final Fantasy. And I'm not saying it's because they're kids, because there are kids who can. But that my kids are not that crowd. But this is cool. Like, I could see getting like Final Fantasy 2 or something like that and putting it on the Android box or something, because then it would be in my Google Play account. And if I ever, if I got that, the Odin, which is Android based, then I could play it on the Odin, like a legit purchased copy on the Odin. I like it that they got ported to Android, because I'm a big Android fan. Let's see what else we got here. But that's not all there was. There was more here in the retro news. There was also the Powkiddy Q20 Mini has recently launched. Ugh. It's styled after the Game Boy Micro. However, I think it's essentially a V90 in a different form factor. Did we read all this last week? When is this dated? That's 6 days ago. Yeah. I feel like I've gone over that already. It's honestly not a bad looking system. It's just, again, just like you mentioned, it's a lower price bracket system. The V90 looks better than this. Yeah, I don't know. And I remember, like, Jerry in particular, going back to Jerry Terrifying, he had a problem with the original Game Boy Advance SP because his hands are really big. So maybe if you're like that and you want like the same kind of system at the same price point, then maybe it's kind of neat. But I took a look at it and it looked like another budget system that I was going to pass on. My V90 is all I need from that. Unless there's some sort of feature that V90 doesn't have on it, and I don't think that's the case. But yeah, it is out there. I mean, more choices just equals good, right? So, super cool. Take care, my friend. I'm rooting for you, Hemrock. Hemrock, man, always good to hear from you, brother. Hope you're doing well. Hope your family is in good shape. Yeah, man, and I hope we can all go outside soon so that we can get together and do this Tiger Fest thing, because now, since all the sickies have started to die down just a little bit, and then I'm hoping that can be a thing soon. All right, so let's see what else we got here on the fail bag. I've got to say that this is probably the most difficult time I've had recording a TCR since I don't know, since a long time. Typically, I try and make it so that these come out on Wednesday for the supporters, and it is now Friday night, and I'm still doing the best I can to get this finished up. So I loaded up YouTube and headed over to the creative studio so that I could read some of the comments off, because we did the audio comment and we did Hemrock's email. But backing it back up to 1 week ago, Hemrock says 6 days ago, you have to build up your marksmanship stat before the bow becomes an effective weapon. He's talking about Morrowind. Otherwise, you'll miss the majority of the time. CF, the Bug Slayer. Nice use of recall when over-encumbered. I like to collect the books too. Moon Sugar is valuable. The Khajiit named Algira in the basement of the Mages Guild in Balmora will buy Moon Sugar. He's located across the teleportation portal in the back room. I know just the one you're talking about. And in fact, I think she says something about sugar. He's like, my sugar is your sugar, or something like that. Yeah, I know just who you're talking about. That's cool. I'll have to check that out. This is about on the flipping through the import PS1 games that I did the past week. He says there's an English patch for Tales of Fantasia for PS1 if you're looking for a playable and affordable RPG. Where are you getting that English patch? Because I went to romhacking.net, which is where I thought I was supposed to go, and I didn't really find any like PS1 English patches, which sucks because I really would love to do that. Japanese PS1 games are amazing. I got this one game here that's like it's like a monorail train driving simulator where you drive like a subway train. That looks dope. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm really excited to. Marmax Gaming says, all of a sudden I finally understand the game. He's talking about the Double Dragon Full Heart trick on NES. People really seem to like that video. Michael Dremmers on the Ambernick RG280V versus Palkitty V90. He says, I took Legend of the River King 2 for Game Boy Color and made it rumble with the Game Boy ROM analyzer for Windows and changed the cartridge type from 1EH and fixed the header. I also patched Nushitsuri's Adventure Kite no Bukuden to English for Game Boy Color, and that has rumble as well. Cool games. I etched and partitioned my SD with new firmware, and it ran a lot better. Huh, okay. Super cool. So apparently the 280V, as I suspected, if you put new firmware on it, then it'll run a lot better. That's awesome. My problem with the 280V isn't really the firmware there, to be honest. Even though the stock firmware does have limitations, my real problem with the 280V is the way it feels in my hands. It's just too tiny. I love how portable it is. I really do. I've actually been able to play it because it's so portable, but it's just too small in my hands. I would much rather play the POW Kitty. I just wish it had that extra power. TJN says, this is on the Beast video I made. Beast was an old MS-DOS game from 1984. He says, where'd you find this version? I can only find the green one. And to that I can only say, I got that game... Well, first of all, I downloaded that game years and years and years ago. Like, probably 10 years ago. But I got that off a site called XTC Abandonware. And that one, unlike, like the old Sierra games or something, this one's actually, like, freeware. You can go get it, and the abandonware sites still have it, and it's fine. But back in the day, I was building an archive of abandonware games. And to begin with, I only wanted to build like a CD-ROM, like a CDR, because I remembered being a kid and having these CDRs full of shareware, and I wanted to like sort of build my own out of abandonware. Well, the collection grew past what fits on a CD, and thankfully, I was able to get it on some sort of media so that I could save it. So it's like the oldest digital thing I have is this collection of abandonware. It goes back to, like, I remember downloading games for this collection that I have off of a dial-up connection. And it's really old. Like, a lot of the sites I got those games off of are not around anymore. So if you look at an MS-DOS, a game that I have that I downloaded somewhere, especially Beast, because that was one my father had when I was a kid, I can't always tell you where it came from. But that was really cool to get a comment on that one, because that's a really obscure game. July Roundup. Send an audio comment free on Twitter and email. That's Kazlob. Good old Balzac. By the way, Balzac, I saw that you like 3 different places you tried to reach me. Thank you so much for that, to make sure I didn't miss it. It's been so tough to keep up with things. I appreciate it. Hemrocks is awesome. Looking forward to it. Big thumbs up for that. Also, just realized the number on the title is mislabeled. This is episode TCR 396, but it shows up as 397. Yes, thank you for that as well. I fixed it immediately when I read that. Desm101 says, I wanted to jump back into the original Final Fantasy, but didn't seem to find the time. I have the PSP version, which I remember being a bit more balanced, but the last time I played it, I got the ship, but then I was lost wandering around forever, and I just put it down. That's another interesting thing about, I don't think this is just exclusive to Final Fantasy, but it's these RPGs, I mean, it's a time commitment to play one of these games. And what you're talking about, never seem to find the time, I felt that in a big way playing Final Fantasy. Like, sitting down to play the original Final Fantasy for the first time during the challenge, when it was the game of the month. I'm glad that I sat down to play it, and I enjoyed it. And I do want to go back to it, even though that, game of the month, so to speak, has come and gone. But I completely understand what it's like. Oh my gosh, there's going to be another big RPG, and I could sit down with this thing for 3 hours and still be at the beginning of the game and not really have anything to talk about. I get that, and that's cool. PSP version is a bit more balanced, huh? I never did buy a PSP. I actually owned a PSP game once, though, for a little while. You know how I order import PS1 games? Somehow I came across a PSP version of Peace Walker for 50 cents, and it actually did sell for 50 cents without shipping, so whoever sold it to me lost money, that's for sure. And it showed up, and it stayed on my shelf, and then I got rid of it a week later when I started trying to pare down all my possessions. Which, I never did get a PSP, so it wasn't going to do me any good. And that is the end of the comments. And that's the end of the show for this week. And since it was so difficult sitting down to do this, I'm not going to dub in the ending theme because I want to make sure this gets up. So big thanks to the supporters for being patient for a few days and letting me finish the episode. And thanks to everybody who spends time just hanging out, listening and commenting. And the fact that we have this little clubhouse to talk about games and music and just to chill, it's really awesome. It's really an awesome, valuable thing that we've built together. So I appreciate, even if you don't necessarily feel like being a supporter or whatever, the time that you give to TCR is something that I truly appreciate. Because as I say, I know it's kind of a cliche, but I really do believe this is true. Time is the most valuable currency, isn't it? It's the one thing they're never making more of. And with that, boys and girls, take care of yourselves, live well, be healthy. I'll see you next week.